Alrighty, everybody. It is currently Monday, December 29th, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from the vertical chamber apparatus. Um, I'm recording this on Monday because I felt like dog shit yesterday. I still don't feel great. I think I might be sick again. This is like my third time being sick in a month. Um, I have no idea what it is. I might have AIDS and leukemia at the same time. I might be the first person ever with a case of AIDS leukemia because I feel like my immune system is just absolutely cooked. I don't know. Or it, the other thing it could be, and it's probably not this, but it could be the fact that over winter break I've been eating like complete shit and not working out at all. But it couldn't possibly be that, right? It couldn't possibly be that. I don't know. But I've just been feeling really shitty. And this subject did not make me feel any less shitty at all. Um, it's a very dark subject, and we will be going into detail. So I don't usually give out warnings before I talk about like darker things like this, but before this one, fair warning before going into this one. We're talking about not really a lot of physical abuse and stuff like that, but just shit that is so psychotic it's almost beyond belief. Like really, the fact that this is not talked about more within just like the general zeitgeist of psychology and like scientific ethics is insane. This is one of the most horrific, not I mean, aside from all the ones that are like we all know, right? Like we all know about the Holocaust and what was his name, Dr. Mengele, the guy who was like he was doing a whole bunch of weird shit, and we all know about Unit 731 of the Japanese Imperial Army and stuff like that. Like we all know about that in the insane asylums and stuff. We've all heard of that. But this is like I've never heard of this before. I have a friend who is in the world of psychology and stuff like that, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, this guy was the monkey guy. He was not. He did some really horrific and, according to other people, not scientific things at all." So we're going to be talking about him today, specifically his pit of despair experiment. And it was, I mean, pit of despair. I guess it describes it, but what he did, I don't think words can properly describe really at all. And I was like, when I was like getting ready to do this episode, I was like, I want to do something about like some crazy science experiment because we haven't done a good like science episode in a while. And so I was like, I want to do something about science experiments. And so I asked the chat GPT about it because I can't go down Wikipedia rabbit holes anymore, dude. Every time I do, it back, always ends up back in Israel. I'll say always ends up back in the Canaan land or whatever it's called. Um, And so I was like looking through it and I was like, a lot of these just seem like way too dark. And so I was like, I'll go with the pit of despair. I don't know, something about that one just sounded like fun to me. And I didn't understand how harsh it is. Like, I'll give a spoiler alert. He puts these baby monkeys in like these isolation chambers. And you're probably thinking, oh, we put them in there for a couple days. It's a lot more than a couple, man. It is a lot more than a couple. And this is going to be an episode um that I think when we get to the later parts, it's going to be very hard to joke about, dude. It is like as I was reading it, I took a little break and then I came back to cover the isolation experiments in the pit of despair and stuff like that. And I was like, jeez, like I'm not gonna throw away the notes or anything like that, but yeah, this is probably the darkest episode I ever plan on doing, and I didn't even plan on it being this dark. I thought this guy was just like messing around with monkeys. You know what I mean? Like if you've ever been to the zoo or whatever, and you see the monkey like playing on the iPad, I thought it was this type of shit. You know, I thought he was having monkeys build like Lego sets in a box or something like that. No, it is it is very, very depressing, and that is kind of what all his experiments are about. And Yeah, we're gonna go over his early life and some of his earlier experiments and his education and stuff like that, and we'll kind of figure out like how he ended up here, like as this. He was probably born a psychopath, but how he was molded into such like an emboldened psychopath, you know? Because really, towards some of the stuff we're going to talk about, even then, people were like, "This is horrible that you're doing this to animals." Like, this is the 50s, dude, or it's like the 30s and 40s and 50s. Like, they didn't even view black people as people. Right? Like, they didn't even view black people as people. They viewed animals as like objects, basically, back then. You know what I mean? And some are. Like a lobster is an object. Like, I'm sorry, that's not it's not on the same level as like a dog or something like that. But these are monkeys, and specifically they're rhesus monkeys, which are some of like the smartest monkeys in the world and shit like that. Um, and so yeah, it even back then, like there's not that like moral relativism that some people can apply to things like this and be like, oh, well, it was back in the day and they just didn't know. They knew. The general consensus, even within people who worked with them, was like, this is fucked up. You know what I mean? This guy's a psychopath who seemingly has no interest in science at all, or no significant interest in science. Maybe he did at one point, but when we get towards the end, we're gonna see uh, this had very little, scientific basis to it. And once again, this is 30s, 40s, 50s, so the scientific method is very well like refined and developed at this point in time. This isn't like the 1800s when they were just like blindly throwing darts at a board, like waiting for something to hit. This, motherfuckers were making nukes, all right? Like we had like the SR-72 Blackbird, the fastest plane ever made, was fucking it was flying around in the skies when this guy was doing a lot of the fucked up shit he was doing. You know what I mean? So, yeah, there's really no moral relativism in this situation at all. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to talk about before I got into this episode was I was feeling pretty shitty going into this one, but then I looked on Spotify. We got a whole bunch of plays today. Very cool. Um, so yeah. Oh, and the other thing, one more thing was before we get into it, I like I don't know if people like all the background information and stuff before I talk about something. I like doing it and I'm probably gonna keep doing it, but I don't know. If you want more just like straight into it, I don't know, let me know, I guess, but I don't think anyone listening to this is listening to actually learn anything. They're just like, what is he gonna say? Something about the Jews again. You know? I think that's probably what most people are listening for at this point, and that's fine. That is fine by me. So this is the pit of despair. So let's everyone take a deep breath. I mean, yeah, just take a deep breath and know for the first part of this, it's going to be pretty normal for the first part. It's really the only very end that gets like Jesus goddamn Christ. Like I got to take a step away from this. So, uh, most of it's pretty, I would say, relatively normal. We are going to get a bit conspiratorial in this episode. There is something very, not necessarily directly related to this guy, but related to people that he was around and stuff like that, that has a little bit of a conspiracy aspect to it, you know? So, the pit of despair. Harry Harlow was born on October 31st, spooky, 1905, to Mabel Rock and Alonzo Harlow, Israel. So Harry Harlow's original last name was Israel. They say he doesn't have any Jewish ancestry, but it's like his last name is literally Israel. You know what I mean? Like if my last name was fucking like I don't know if my name was like John China or something like that, and and I was like not Chinese, I just really like the name. Like I got some questions. You know what I mean? His last name is literally Israel. Like you can't. I don't know. Like claiming you're not Jewish at that point's fucking insane. Yeah, my last name is Russia, but I'm not Russian. did you just think it was cool? Like, did someone in your family lineage just think the last name Israel sounded cool? Like, I don't know. And especially if you think about a lot of the social prejudice that Jews faced, you know, all over the Western world at this time, it's like, why would anyone like willingly choose the last name Israel if they weren't Jewish? I don't know. It's a little bit, I got some questions about it. And obviously, Israel wasn't like a country back then or anything. I think it was still like the British Palestine Mandate or whatever. But yeah, his original last name was Israel, and he was born on October 31st. So very foreboding, I'll say. Not necessarily the Jewish thing, but definitely the October 31st thing is it's a little bit of foreshadowing. You know what I mean? And it's a little bit, yeah, he definitely the zodiac people might have a point. You know what I mean? Usually I don't believe in zodiac signs and, your personality or whatever is inherently linked to the day you were born. But I mean, this guy was a fucking psychopath who tortured animals and he was born on October 31st. I don't know. I feel like there's something there. And I don't even know if Halloween was a thing back then, but yeah, that's when this fucking psycho was born. So Harlow was the third of four brothers, and according to an unfinished biography or autobiography, his mother experienced bouts of depression throughout his life. So Mabel Rock, his mother, was very prone to depression. He grew up in Iowa, by the way. I didn't write that down, but he grew up in like, I don't know, Fairfield, Iowa, or some bullshit like that. Midwest got a lot of fucking psychos. We got Dahmer, we got John Wayne Gacy. We got a lot of psychos. Same with like the Pacific Northwest. I don't know. It's the white people around the Midwest are just too isolated. Same with the Pacific Northwest, I think. I think that's why so many psychos come out of there. But yeah, and this is like it, I don't know too much about like the whole serial killer thing. I did watch Mindhunter, which is a TV show about like the development of the FBI's like killer catching program. And so I know that like maternal like negligence and abuse and things like that, that's like one of the big things that causes people who are like predisposed to being serial killers to like fully launch into the thing. You know what I mean? This guy wasn't a serial killer. Very well could have been. He has a depressed mother. He's like a very smart guy, as we'll learn about later. He was like torturing animals. These are all like the hallmarks of of a serial killer. But the other justification for this, or the other thing that this kind of explains later in his life is he was very like obsessed with depression and stuff like that. And I'll talk about later some of the other ways that depression came into his life. And so that's I don't know, some people were trying to like justify him like torturing baby monkeys with this, and I was like, no. I think this guy was just a regular old Midwest psycho. And so he's growing up in Iowa, and he briefly attended Reed College in Portland. Like I was saying, Pacific Northwest, a lot of psychos up there. Uh, Reed College in Portland before being admitted to Stanford on an aptitude test where he originally studied English before declaring a psychology major. So going to Reed, and he gets in on an aptitude test, and this is going to be important later. It's probably like an IQ test of some kind that got him into Portland, or not Portland, that got him into Stanford. Um, Not necessarily like he's academically smart or he's doing well academically. It was the simple fact that he just had a high IQ, and so that's why he got led into Stanford. That's gonna come up a little bit later. And so he tried to do like the whole English thing. He wanted to be a writer, I guess, but he failed miserably at that. Like in the thing, it said due to disastrous grades. Which how do you fail at an English major? I don't know. I'm not shitting on any English majors or anything out there, but I feel like it's not hard to get A's in those classes, right? And he was failing English classes. Like, I don't know. Just read the goddamn book, you know what I mean? Write the poem. I don't feel like it's that. Even at Stanford, I feel like an English major isn't difficult. I feel like it's a notoriously easy degree. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like some of the arts degrees kind of. can be harder, but I feel like English definitely isn't one of those degrees that even has the potential to be particularly hard. But I don't know. Somehow he fucked it up. He's like, I'm gonna do psychology now. Um, and yeah, psychology was not like a well-developed thing at this time. They were still like fucking with Freud or whatever, which I guess they don't fuck with Freud anymore. Um, and so yeah, I can kind of understand how he switched to that one where he was like, this is just at this point, it's complete bullshit. It's psychology is complete bullshit at this point in time. Now we got a little bit more, you know what I mean, a better understanding of it and all that stuff. But at this point, it's literally like he's infected by a ghost. He's possessed, right? Like that's what psychology is at this point in time. So he's going to Stanford and he eventually obtains his bachelor's degree. And after obtaining his bachelor's degree, Harlow became a graduate student at Stanford, where he worked under Calvin Perry Stone, who was an animal behaviorist, and Walter Richard Miles, who was like a vision expert. This is all, these guys are basically doing experiments on animals to see how they translate to humans. That's essentially what you have to know about these guys. And they were both Stanford guys, so probably pretty well educated. But once again, this isn't, not a lot of people are going to college at this point, so I don't know if going to Stanford at this point in time necessarily carries the same weight that it does, you know what I mean, in modern times. But I'm also not 100% sure. I think it's always been a pretty prestigious university, but I think maybe at this point in time it did, especially in the psychology department, right? Like this guy's a psychologist and one of his like main mentors, which is how like graduate programs work basically. Like when you go to a graduate program, yeah, you are going to classes and stuff like that, but a lot of it is like mentoring, you know what I mean, from someone with like a PhD or another postgraduate degree like that. Um, and yeah, one of them's a vision expert and the other one is an animal behaviorist. So, yeah. And Harlow, Stone, and Miles all worked under the supervision of Lewis Terman, who was the creator of the Stanford Binet IQ test. And he was also a well-known eugenicist. And so this is the guy that actually made Harry Israel change his name to Harry Harlow because he was like, he's obviously a eugenicist. And so he's like, I get that you're not Jewish or whatever, but you don't even want to be associated with Jews. So change your last name from Israel to Harlow. So this was the guy that made him change to that. In the Stanford Binet IQ test, the IQ test had existed before this guy, Lewis Terman, but Lewis Terman like refined them a whole lot, and he actually got like some sort of contract with the U.S. Army during World War One. Like this guy was born in like the 1880s, I think, or something like that. And so he gets this contract with the U.S. Army during World War One to administer IQ tests to all of the soldiers. And I don't know, somehow that came into eugenics somewhere. A lot of eugenicists back then. When I originally, the original topic of this episode was I was going to do Planned Parenthood, but I was like, once again, that's too dark, and I'll probably get like become just like a pussy talking about it, being like, dude, and they don't fucking, you know what I mean? And that originally started as a eugenics program as well. Some might say it still is, but not the point. Not the point. Um, so yeah, I was surprised to see that eugenics came back in. But I mean, in the 20s and 30s, like America was really like the place where eugenics got its start. Like I don't think people know that as much. It's the place where eugenics got its start. And there was like some level of implementation around it, especially when it came to intelligence and IQ and stuff like that. And so this guy Terman, he was probably involved in some in some stuff like that. And so this is where we get a little bit conspiratorial, like I was saying. So Terman, his son Frederick, he was widely credited with being the father of Silicon Valley. So not Louis Terman, but his son Frederick. He was the father of Silicon Valley, or that's what they say at least, which everyone knows Silicon Valley. It's like the major tech center uh in America. And there's a whole lot of conspiracy theories about that. But like I talked about earlier, a lot of Harlow's experiments have to do with isolation and stuff like that, and how isolation changes behavior and stuff. And then you look at what's going on now with a lot of technology and shit like that, social media, a lot of these, Facebook shit, or I guess Meta, that has like bloomed out of Silicon Valley. It's like was Harlow talking a little bit to Frederick, and they were coming up with like this big, grand conspiracy to like isolate people to change their behavior and make them more complacent and, less able to interact in social settings and stuff like that, and also reduce population. We're going to talk about how Harlow's experiments prove that isolation, even after you come out of isolation, leads to um, inabilities in a sexual context. um, we're gonna talk about that. So yeah, that's our brief, toe dip into conspiracy for this episode. I don't know. I don't know, like I'm saying. And so he studies under this guy Terman. That whole thing about Silicon Valley, it's not really relevant to Harlow himself, but I don't know. I just wanted to include it because I wanted to get conspiratorial on him. So after completing his doctoral dissertation, Harlow immediately accepted a professorship at the University of Madison, or at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, um, where he built the primate lab, which was used for, at the time, cutting-edge research. So, gets into immediately becomes a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And originally, he asked, I think the psychology department for money to build a primate research center. Remember, or I think both of the guys he studied under were big into animal research. I don't know if it was necessarily primate research, but some sort of animal research. Um, and they denied it. So what he did was he went and he bought like some shitty, like abandoned building. Real psycho shit. You know what I mean? Like H.H. Holmes, the torture castle and stuff like that. So he went and bought like this dilapidated old building and had his postgraduate students, or I guess graduates, would it be postgraduate or graduate students? I don't know. So whatever. The kids who have already graduated who are working on like masters and PhDs and stuff like that. He had those guys basically go and build this primate lab, which we're gonna find out later. You're imagining like MRI machines and fucking, X-rays or whatever and like wires attached to a monkey's head. No, like cutting edge research at this time, I guess, was a fucking metal box where you just put a baby monkey for like 2 fucking years, and then you find out that the goddamn baby monkey went insane after you put it in a fucking metal box for 2 years. Like that's what cutting edge research was at this time. Spoiler alert. That's that was like a big thing that he did. He did a lot of other things with monkeys, and he started out he was having fun with the monkeys. You know what I mean? He was testing the if five monkeys jump on a bed and one falls off and bonks his head, is that what does that result in? Like that's what he was originally up to. And then he was like, can a monkey survive a guillotine execution? Like that eventually is what his research turned into after he was having five little monkeys jump on the bed, dude. He took a dark turn very quickly. Um, and we're not going to go back into his life story, so I will say he had two wives die on him, and his third wife, or his second wife, when his second wife got cancer, he underwent like what's that called? Electroshock therapy to try to cure his depression, but that was like in the 70s. I think that was in like the late 60s, early 70s when he was undergoing like that shock therapy, and that was before he started fucking torturing monkeys to death. Or that was after. Sorry, that was after he started torturing monkeys to death. So once again, there's not even that excuse of, oh, he underwent electroshock therapy and he went fucking insane and tortured all these baby monkeys to death. No, he was just a fucking psycho to begin with. And so eventually, he continued to work at UWM, where he received countless awards and worked as a consultant for the U.S. Army. He was like the head of the Human Resources Department of the Army for a while, and he received like a ton of fucking awards. I'll try to see if I can find them. So yeah, he he was elected to the United States National Academy of Sciences. He won the Howard Crosby Warren Medal. He was elected to the American Philosophical Society. Fucking, I don't know why. The National Medal of Science, he won that one in 1967. He was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, sorry. He got the gold medal from the American Psychological Foundation, and he served as the head of the Human Resources branch, like I said, for the U.S. Army. Yeah. And he was a consultant to the U.S. Army Scientific Advisory Panel, and he was also the president of the American Psychological Association, which is still like a big thing to this day. Like if you're in college and you have a professor that's like you need to write an APA style bibliography, that's the American Psychological Association. That's what the APA is. And so yeah, he did all this shit even after he tortured all these monkeys to death. Or he didn't torture them necessarily to death, but he basically fucking did. He basically tortured these monkeys to death. And so even after doing all that, and even after people called his experiments like horrific and inhumane, he still got all this shit. So I mean, if that's what they're doing in public, what are they doing in private? This isn't a conspiracy episode, but I don't know. You know what I mean? This guy's working with the army and he's also doing experiments about like isolation and stuff like that. And there was a ton of other psychological experiments at this time. We're talking this is like MK Ultra, um, which that was like the OSS CIA type of stuff. But yeah, he might have been involved in some shady business that we just didn't know about. We just didn't know about it. But he might have been involved in some shady business, but he was definitely involved in some monkey business. Horseplay, monkey business, whatever you want to call it. He was involved in some of that. So in his early years at UWM, Harlow worked with primates from the Henry Villas Zoo, and he studied their learning, cognition, and memory. He created this thing. What was it called? It was called like the observation learning apparatus. What the fuck was it called? Yeah, the Wisconsin General Test apparatus. That's what it was. And it wasn't like you hear the Wisconsin General Test apparatus and you're thinking it's like this big complicated machine. Basically, what it was you lock like a monkey in a box and then you put like a tray in front of the monkey, right, with like a puzzle on it or something like that. And then there's a two-way mirror that you can watch the monkey like do the puzzle through. That's essentially what the Wisconsin um, General Test apparatus is. And so they were, I don't know, they just talked about it like it was some big fucking crazy invention. And it was like, no, dude, it's a fucking box with a monkey in it. It's not, this isn't some great, technological revolution or whatever. It's literally a box with a fucking monkey in it, and you can like close and open the box with the monkey in it. This isn't, this is like a fucking, this is a trap. This has existed since the beginning of time. It's a box with a monkey in it, and the monkey's stacking a bunch of fucking blocks on top of each other or whatever, and you're watching the monkey. This is, I don't, I don't know, just the way they talked about it and like the name of it, it just sounds like it's this crazy piece of technology or whatever, and it's not. Like I said, it's a fucking metal box with a goddamn monkey. And the monkey's fucking playing Angry Birds on an iPad or whatever. Like that's what the Wisconsin General Test apparatus was. And so he's working with these monkeys from the zoo, um, trying to test their learning and cognition and their memory and stuff like that. And then we're like, how the fuck do we get to putting a monkey in a tiny little metal box and just watching the little fucker go insane? We're going to talk about that. And so during these studies, Harlow noticed that the monkeys developed strategies for his tests, and this became known as meta learning, but Harlow called it learning to learn or learning sets. Um, we're going to talk about later. Harlow did not like scientific terminology like that, like the term meta learning. He just didn't fuck with that. The vertical chamber apparatus, aka the pit of despair. He was the one who called it the pit of despair. It wasn't other people who were like talking shit about his experiment or whatever that called it the pit of despair. He himself called it the pit of despair. He didn't like these scientific words. And this was actually it was a pretty big breakthrough because during this time there was basically like two schools of thought about how you learn to learn. So there was the whole dash Spence school of thought, which was basically that like you learn via trial and error. You're like, oh, this doesn't work, this works, this doesn't work, this works. You know what I mean? like when you're in high school or whatever and you're learning to study. I don't know, I didn't study in high school. I really still don't study. And you're like trying to see what works best for you. And you're like, do flashcards work? Or am I like a read it and then write it down and memorize like which one works best for me? Um, and so yeah, there was the trial and error school of thought, and then there was the other school of thought, which was the Gestalt school of thought. And that's that you're basically just going along like doing these things, but then you have like a revelation basically. And what Harlow proved with these studies was that it was a little bit of both. You know what I mean? With simple tasks, it was mostly trial and error. But when it came to more complicated things, it was the Gestalt, idea of these sudden, revelations or insights into how, what I mean, what you're working with, how that thing works, you know what I mean, how it functions and stuff like that. And so, yeah, this is actually a pretty revolutionary breakthrough at the time, especially when it came to learning and how primates learn, you know what I mean? And the monkeys that he's doing these experiments on are pretty similar to humans, and stuff like that. These aren't like, I don't think he was doing it with like chimps. Chimps obviously are ideal, but they're also fucking chimps and they'll like rip your fucking face off. So he's working with some smaller, maybe little bit more dumber monkeys during this time. And so, in order to gain insight into the development of learning, Harlow established a breeding colony of rhesus macaques, which are an animal that have at least some level of self-awareness. Its self-awareness is pretty hard to identify. You can't talk to a monkey or whatever, but these guys have at least they have some understanding of like cause and effect and things like that, and they understand how how they act affects not only like the physical world, but also these, greater social interactions and stuff like that. And they have like an actual idea of it, you know what I mean? They're not like an ant or a bee where they just kind of come pre-programmed and they know perfectly how to act no matter the situation and they're like talking with pheromones or whatever. These monkeys, they have a deeper understanding of like social and physical cause and effect than most other things have, you know? And that's kind of what makes these monkeys specifically useful, but it also makes his experiments even more horrifying because it's like a dude almost. It's not quite a dude, but it's very close to a dude basically that he's doing these experiments on. Not full dude, but like most of the way there. You know what I mean? It's like Michelle Obama. It's like that's not fully a dude, but like it's very, very close to being a That's basically what these little rhesus macaques are. And they're a pretty standard monkey. Um, yeah, nothing really interesting about the monkey themselves besides the self-awareness. And this isn't like common among all monkeys or whatever. Like rhesus macaques are kind of special in this way, in like their level of self-awareness. And like I said, their social and physical understanding of cause and effect and things like that. They have a deeper understanding of that than most other monkeys do. And so the monkeys were reared in nursery settings in what is known as maternal deprivation. So I don't once again I don't I don't really have a clear or there's no super clear answer as to why he did this. One of the main things is he did want to understand their development. And so obviously if you have the monkey with its mom, like the mom is gonna try to fucking fight you if you take her baby away. That's just kind of true of all animals and stuff like that. Like even a fucking gator would do that. And so that's why he raised these monkeys in maternal deprivation, but that also kind of lends itself to um discrediting a lot of his experiments, because most people aren't raised in maternal deprivation. Like these monkeys are raised in complete maternal deprivation. Like they're around other baby monkeys and stuff like that. But in terms of their mothers, they're never around their mothers. Like they just literally take the fucking baby away from the mom as soon as it's born and stuff like that. Right. So that it kind of disproves a lot of these things because we're going to talk about it, his early experiments, I'll say, kind of make his later experiments null and void, basically. Um, and so yeah, the best way to talk about that is just to explain it. So Harlow made wire and cloth surrogates. So these things are horrifying, by the way. Like just like a picture of Harlow's monkey surrogates. They are terrifying to look at. I'm looking at the picture on Wikipedia. Yeah, it's pretty horrifying to look at these things. They don't look anything. It's like a monkey uncanny valley type of thing, right? Like that's what these surrogates look like. And so there was the ones with the wire, and then there was ones that were basically the wire ones, but they had a little bit more monkey of a face, and then they had cloth around the wire. And so he found that the babies overwhelmingly preferred the cloth ones, even when the wire surrogates had milk. And so basically, what he'd do is he'd get the baby monkey and he'd put it like in a box or whatever. He was a big fan of that. I'd say roughly almost 100% of Harlow's experiments are just putting a monkey in a box with various things. Like that's what 90% of his experiments are at the very least, and that might be an underestimation. And so what he'd do is he'd put the baby monkey in a box, and he'd have a cloth surrogate, and then he'd have the wire surrogate. And he did like variations where it was like the wire surrogate with milk, the wire surrogate without milk, the cloth surrogate with milk, and the cloth surrogate without milk. And the babies, even when the wire surrogate had like the bottle of milk, they would still cling to the mother with the cloth on it, and then they'd like go over and like take a real quick sip out of the wire surrogate's bottle that it had. And so what this kind of proved was the main idea about maternal and just like parental bonding as a whole in mammals back in the day was it was simply about milk. Like that's all they thought it was. It was like whatever the baby gets its milk from, that's what it's gonna associate its parent with. And this experiment kind of disproved that, and it proved that like contact is a lot more important, really even more important than milk, right? Like that's why when you see like when a baby's born, they immediately like put it on the mom. And that's because kind of you can kind of attribute that to Harlow's experiments, but also people have been doing that for like centuries, right? Millennia, since probably the beginning of human time, right? Like you look at yeah, you just look at like most cultures around the world besides like America and like these industrialized cultures, and it's like the baby's attached to the mom 24/7, right? And like they learn that via like trial and error. And they learn that having the baby attached to the mom was like very important for the baby's development and stuff like that. And even a lot of fathers nowadays do skin to skin contact, I guess also to make the baby feel a bond, but I don't know. I feel like that might confuse the baby. They kind of try to discredit this experiment though by saying that the clinging behavior of these baby monkeys is or of like monkeys as a whole is like completely different than how humans interact with their babies. But at the same time, it's like humans like strollers haven't always existed, right? Like humans evolved carrying their babies and stuff like that. And we didn't have clothes for like most of our history, and so the babies were in skin to skin contact. So I really don't like this Harlow guy, but trying to discredit that experiment in that way is kind of crazy. I guess the main way you could try to discredit it is by being like, yeah, these monkeys are fucking insane. They're not acting like normal monkeys because you're not raising them like normal monkeys. Like that's how I would go about discrediting this experiment personally. That's how I would do it, but I don't know. That's the way people try to discredit it is by being like, well, the behavior of the baby monkeys is completely different from the behavior of humans. And it's like not in a natural environment, right? Like in a natural environment, a human is like she's carrying her baby for most of the day, right? In a natural environment. And so it's like, I don't know, trying to discredit it like that is kind of dumb. So, and in one experiment, Harlow filled a small space with novel objects and he placed the babies inside and observed how they interacted with the objects with and without their surrogates. And these weren't like that none of these objects were particularly dangerous or anything like that. They were just like things that the baby monkeys had never seen before, right? You got to remember, these monkeys are raised in like a dilapidated old building in fucking Madison, Wisconsin. And so he's just putting like balls and blocks and like little toys and stuff basically in these rooms. But obviously these monkeys have lived in like this fucking clinical, like sterile environment for their entire lives. Um, and so they kind of like freak out whenever they see these new novel objects. They're like, "What the fuck is that? A ball? A round thing? I've never seen a round thing before. I'm used to like square edges and stuff like that." Um, and so yeah, that was like this experiment, and all the babies had surrogates at some point. They were raised in a social setting, but like with the other baby monkeys and stuff, but they also had surrogates that they would like cling to all day, which I guess is how baby monkeys operate. And so the babies with surrogates would interact with the objects and return to the surrogates when scared, whereas the solo babies were like paralyzed with fear. And this is where I got really this is where I got really sad. When I was fucking reading this, the babies without the surrogates, they would like see the objects and they would just like go into a corner and like wrap themselves up in a little ball and just like suck their thumbs, which is, yeah, it's very sad reading it, but you gotta remember this is like the 30s and 40s and 50s, and this guy's like an angry fucking white dude from the Midwest, and he's like, "Stop being such a pussy. You're acting like a dame right now. Stop acting. Have a cigarette and calm down." You know, like that's how this guy is viewing the situation, you know? And so, yeah, this was like the first thing I read that made me like really sad. He also did another experiment with the baby monkeys, with the surrogates and all that stuff, where he had like this teddy bear that made like a noise, I guess. It was like, "I love you," or whatever. And he would put the baby monkeys the in the room with the teddy bear or whatever, and obviously with or without the surrogates, and basically the same thing happened. Like the ones with the surrogates would like go up and like kind of fuck with the teddy bear and like sometimes attack it or whatever, and the ones without the surrogates were just like, "What the fuck?" and they would go hide in the corner. uh yeah. In this experiment, I mean, really, raising a baby monkey in like a fucking metal box without a mother, that's already inhumane. This experiment though, it's not particularly inhumane. um Compared to some of the other stuff that Harlow has done. He's just putting a baby monkey in a box with a fucking some blocks or whatever. And yeah, yeah. I was trying to think of a joke. No, this is just really fucked up. He's just torturing baby monkeys. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. And so, to try to gain insight into the development and results of depression, Harlow decided to put babies in complete social isolation. So at this point, he is raising them in a maternal deprivation sense, but he's not putting them in like total social isolation. You know, they're still chilling with the other baby monkeys, you know, playing tag or whatever. And people are like, "Why are you anthropomorphizing these animals?" You know, I feel like some people might say that in this situation. It's like, dude, it's a monkey. A monkey, like, I would probably eat a monkey, but like, this isn't a fucking rat or whatever. Like this is a pretty even like a rat in this situation is I'm still a little bit like, why are we doing this to rats? Like, is there not another way that we can study this? But this is a full on monkey, dude. This is like 3 steps away from being a guy. This guy was very close. Like you could put this guy in an office. You know what I mean? Like this guy could do a pretty simple like office job or something. Like a racist macaque. This is a smart fucking monkey. You know what I mean? This guy could. I feel like it's reasonable to expect that a fucking racist macaque could fill out a spreadsheet or something like that. Like that's what a monkey could do, dude. Like there's that one monkey from South Africa. I don't know if you guys have heard this story before. Dude, there was this monkey in South Africa that worked on a goddamn train. And not even on the train. He wasn't like shoveling coal or whatever. He was like a switch operator, which a switch operator is like if you've ever seen like the old movies where it's like a runaway train and they like have to pull the thing to make the train go onto the other track, that's what this fucking monkey was doing. He was a baboon. He wasn't even as smart as a rhesus macaque. So yeah, these are pretty. You, there is, it's it's hard to say that you anthropomorphize these animals because they're pretty, they're dudes. You know what I mean? Like you could chill with one of these guys. Like we've probably all seen a video of like a fucking orangutan smoking weed or whatever. Like that's what a rhesus macaque is capable of, dude. A rhesus macaque could hit a crazy fucking rip off a gravity bong or something like that. So yeah, they're already anthropomorphized, is what I'm saying. These animals come pre-anthropomorphized. Um, and so he's putting these babies in complete isolation, and he would put the babies in a box for this is fucking insane. He would put the babies in a box for 30 days. You're thinking, oh, 30 days, that's bad, but I mean, it could be worse, right? I mean, he's only putting them in there for 30 days. No, he would put them in there for 30 days or 4 months. It's a little excessive, right? Like that's how much time you do in the hole for like stabbing a dude in the fucking state penitentiary or whatever. That seems a little excessive for this goddamn baby monkey who really didn't do anything. 4 months, 6 months, and 1 year. And their only interactions with the outside world were the human hands that fed them and watered them and like changed the newspaper or whatever that they were like shitting and pissing on. And it was four monkeys each for each of these like durations. So it was four monkeys would go into the 30 days, and then there was like a four other monkeys would go. So it wasn't like the same monkey going through these different periods of isolation. It was all different monkeys that he was putting in these boxes for a fucking year. There's there's no animal that you could put in a completely fucking blank box for a year and not come out insane. There's like really no justification for this experiment. It's just cruelty. It's literally just cruelty. And you'd leave them in there for a year. And then when they got out, and we're going to talk about some of the specifics about when they came out, but when they got out, they would they were all fucking crazy. And it's like, yeah, dude, I could have told you that. This isn't hindsight is 2020. Regular sight is more than enough to understand that putting any living being, right? Any conscious being, or at least semi-conscious, right? Like that's what these monkeys are. Or even like a fucking, like I was saying, a rat. Literally any animal in this situation in a blank box for a year. Yeah, that animal's gonna come out fucked up. Like I don't, uh, even with the lack of scientific knowledge they had back then, especially regarding, animals and psychology and stuff like that, I feel like there's really no like reasonable fucking justification for this. It's like at this point in time, dude, solitary isolation, that was, or I guess solitary isolation, is that a double? This is not a double negative, but still, whatever. Solitary was like a punishment in prison at this time. They knew that this fucked people up, right? The experiments were out. This had been proven. I don't fucking know. It's crazy. This guy was literally just torturing monkeys for fun. He was a fuck. This guy, if you told me that like they went to, you know, Madison, Wisconsin, and some dude was digging around and they found a bunch of like dead women somewhere with like their heads bashed in, and they somehow tracked that and like connected it to Harry Harlow, I would reasonably believe you. I'd be like, yeah, this guy he seems like he's like going into a sorority house and like beating a chick to death with a crowbar, screaming, "I hate you, mom." Like that's, I feel like that's the energy that Harry Harlow is giving off at this point. Because this doesn't have any scientific basis to it, really at all. There's no control group. He's not, or I guess there is a control group, but the control group isn't, it's not really a control group because a control group is like, if you don't know, it's basically a thing that doesn't get any special treatment at all, right? So like a control group in a drug study would be like the placebo group, right? The one that you don't give the medicine to. But all of these monkeys are being fucked up in some way or another, right? Remember, because they're not getting any interaction with their mother. They're getting interaction with each other and stuff like that, but they are receiving basically no interaction from their moms. And so it's like you don't even have a control group in the situation. So there's right. So there's not even that scientific basis here. These monkeys aren't being raised in a normal way. So you can't really 100% delineate between what is like a natural behavior and what is an unnatural behavior because none of this is natural. So, yeah, it's just nonsense. Even then, it was just psychotic fucking nonsense. And so when these monkeys came out, they were deeply disturbed and were bullied in social settings as well as not being able to have sex. I talked about that earlier. The monkeys that came out just they couldn't bang. And you gotta remember, these are monkeys. These ain't people. You know what I mean? These monkeys are banging all the time. It's it's getting funky up in there. These are some funky monkeys. They're getting freaky as hell, dude. This is probably like the 50s, 60s. They got a little bit of a hippie thing going on. They're just getting swampy, having having musty monkey sex all the time. But these monkeys, they they weren't able to do that like at all. They just couldn't bang each other. They got bullied all the time, which I don't know how you tell if a monkey is bullying another monkey because I feel like most of the shit I've seen from monkeys like looks like bullying. Like they're always like pulling each other's tails, like running around and shit like that. So, but I guess somehow this fucking psychopath was able to be like, nope, these monkeys were they were being bullied. Um, this is where we get into another fun subject, another fun thing that fucking Harry Harlow did to these goddamn monkeys. God, what a fucking this guy's just a psycho. Like, I guess they teach people about this in psychology classes, but I don't know. From my understanding of the scientific method, this seems like it doesn't have any scientific basis at all, right? Or any like real scientific basis. Aside from like broad generalizations that, yeah, when you put a conscious being or a semi-conscious being in a blank metal box for a year, it fucks it up mentally. And once again, I didn't need these experiments to prove that fact to me. That was obvious. I saw that with my own two eyes. So, like I said, this is very fun. I, I guess a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about rape here. It is monkey rape. So, I don't know. In the animal kingdom, out in the wild, rape is a little bit more common. But yeah, we're going to be talking about monkey rape here. So, fair warning. So, in order to observe the effects of isolation, um, in a maternal sense, Harlow devised a rape rack. That's what he called it. Remember, Harlow, this guy's just a fucking literal psycho. He's not even pretending to use like scientific sounding words. He's like, no, I made this thing where the fucking chick monkeys get raped, and I guess there's like a special mating position. I don't know if it's like doggy style or missionary or whatever that rhesus monkeys fucking or rhesus macaques fucking. But this rape rack that he made, God, it's fucking insane. Sorry. This thing that he made forced the female monkeys into that position. Um, and so, yeah. And these were the female monkeys that had been isolated. And after having their offspring, they abused and neglected them. One of the female monkeys crushed her baby's head, and the other one put its head on the ground and then chewed its feet off. And then at this point, you know what Harlow says? Let me try to find the quote. He says one of the most retarded fucking things I've ever heard. It like in my entire life. It was fucking insane what he had to say about this. Where is it at? Let me see if I can find the quote here. I don't know. I can't find the quote, but he was basically like, let me see if I. It, no, whatever. He was basically like, these monkeys are so fucking evil. Can you believe it that the mom monkey chewed the baby's feet off? And it's like, dude, you're the one who made the mom monkey that fucking crazy to begin with, right? And also, another thing that we're not accounting for, right, is that these mothers aren't like posturing themselves to have sex, right? Like we've all seen baboons when they get like those big old red butts, and then that means it's baboon fucking time. It's time for the baboons to bang. We've all seen that shit before. So the other, once again, not scientific at all. The other thing that he's not accounting for is that these moms have not like a monkey. If a monkey wants to fuck, a monkey will know, will let you if it wants to, will let you know if it wants to fuck, right? Like the monkey, it'll tell you if it wants to bang, dude. Chick monkeys aren't like human monkeys. They won't like try to hide their intentions and be all like coy or whatever. A chick monkey, she's popping that pussy. You know what I mean? She's out there throwing some ass around, being like, "Who wants some of this monkey pussy? Who wants some of this monk pussy? You know what I mean? Who wants some of this?" And so he's basically crediting this um like the neglect and abuse of the female monkeys. He's crediting that to the social isolation, but then it's like there's this other variable here that these monkeys were fucking as the as the name of the contraption suggests, these monkeys were raped. So it's like it, it it's just crazy. It doesn't make any scientific sense at all in any way, shape, or form. It, because yeah, there should be like some sense of maternal instinct there, but there's just this complete other variable that he's disregarding. Just being like, it's because of the social isolation. And it's like, it very well could have be because of the rape, dude, right? Like these monkeys, like I said, the monkeys will let you know if they want to fuck, right? Or let the other monkey, as a human, is probably maybe a little bit harder to tell. I don't know, but they'll let the other monkeys know if they're down for some monkey business. All right. And so these monkeys aren't even like, ain't even popping that pussy like that, right? They're not the pheromones or the hormones or whatever it is aren't there right necessarily for the female monkeys because if they were, then the female monkeys would be popping that pussy like I said. So another like variable that this guy's just like disregarding in his scientific experiments, quote unquote. All right, and so even after all this, all this shit. Remember, he's putting these baby monkeys in a box for fucking a year straight. I think he might even put a couple in there for 2 years straight. I don't know. Yeah, 24 months. So he did put some of these monkeys in this fucking box for 2 years straight. That's it's just fucking insane. But so even after all this bullshit, Harlow felt he didn't capture the helpless essence of depression and decided he needed a pit of despair. Remember, he's allegedly suffering from depression at some point in his life. His mom had depression, and so he's just like obsessed with depression. And it's like this guy's issue clearly isn't depression. He's clearly very excited and more than willing to torture these monkeys to death. So I don't think his fucking issue is depression. I think he's a fucking psychopath. Like this is just fucking insane. And so now we're gonna get to the namesake of this episode, and we're gonna talk about the goddamn pit of despair. And it's worse than it sounds. It is literally worse than it sounds. So the vertical chamber apparatus was an inverted triangular prism made basically out of sheet metal with a mesh top where 3-month-old monkeys would be placed for extended pyramid periods. And so this is basically it's an upside down triangle. And so it's made out of sheet metal, so it has like these super slippery walls and stuff that the monkeys can't climb up. And the bottom is kind of rounded. It doesn't come to an exact point. It's kind of rounded at the bottom, but it's definitely not big enough for a fucking monkey to like sit down or to lay down like comfortably in. And like I said, the sides are super slippery, and then there's like the open top, or I guess the mesh top, which is just I don't. This just the I don't even know. I don't even have fucking words for how completely nonsensical all of this is. It, once again, I could have told you this. I could have. These experiments were not needed. Yeah, if you put a person in a cage where they can't move, and you put them in there when they're like a little toddler or whatever, which is basically what these monkeys are, and you keep them there until they're an adult, yeah, that person's gonna be fucked up. You, no need for the fucking experiment, Harlow. Figure that out. Figure that one out using my brain, right? I know you're busy thinking about how you want to fucking, kill women because your mom didn't pay enough attention to you when you were a kid, but the rest of us can use our brains and pretty quickly put our finger on it. You know what I mean? Figure it out. All right, this guy is fucking crazy. So anyway, Harlow insisted on calling the vertical chamber apparatus the pit of despair, despite his colleagues telling him this wasn't politically appropriate. They were like, dude, no one like if anyone hears about you calling this place the pit of despair, they're gonna like freak out, right? Because like I said, there's no there's no argument for like moral relativism. People knew this was fucked up, right? They knew that putting a goddamn monkey, right? Even at this time, they knew that like monkeys were at least a little bit smart, and so they knew putting a monkey in a tiny fucking metal box was inhumane. And so the other people around him knew this. So imagine what people who weren't involved in these studies would have thought. All right. And so the monkeys were placed in the pit, or the monkeys who were placed in the pit already had formed social bonds, and this Harlow specifically specifically wanted to break these social bonds or break the ability to bond in a social sense to try to create symptoms of depression. And this is kind of where I link it back to Silicon Valley a little bit because it's like we see that these monkeys who don't have like the surrogates with them are like cowards. They'll just curl up in a ball and be all scared. And then we see how like isolation causes depression and stuff like that. And he's like closely linked to this eugenicist whose son founded Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley kind of, you know, started the tech revolution that led to a lot of the social isolation that we're experiencing nowadays. I don't know. But once again, I don't think I don't think that this was needed. Even to like these fucking, you know, these devil worshipping, pedophiles in Silicon Valley, even those people didn't need this scientific experiment to prove to them that social isolation fucks people up in a social sense. They didn't need that. It also fucks them up physically, especially with like the development. This goes back to the earlier experiment of the wire surrogates versus the cloth surrogates. uh, Harlow found that the babies who had the cloth surrogates, they didn't gain any more weight, but they were significantly healthier than the baby monkeys who had the wire surrogates. Like the ones who had the wire surrogates were like constantly stressed out. Their digestive systems didn't work properly, even though they were getting the same milk and stuff like that. So yeah, that was just something I wanted to mention real quick. But yeah, at this point, we're just in nonsense land. We're just in a psycho who wants to torture monkeys, right? Because his fucking dad was always on business trips and his mom was a fucking alcoholic. Uh, and so the monkeys, for the first few days, would try to climb the walls before assuming a hunched position at the bottom of the prison. And he kept them there for a year, even after they, like, them fucking monkeys depressed at this point, dude. Like, why? You have the symptoms of depression that you want. Why do you continue to keep it in this isolated environment? Because he's a psycho. It could be the only possible answer at this point. And so Harlow found that all the monkeys, no matter their previous dispositions, came out extremely damaged. And this is where we get into a little bit of fucking shit talking from some of the people. So one of Harlow's students, William Mason, said that no person with respect for life would find the experiments not offensive. And he said that if Harlow's goal was to make a giant mess, then he did a perfect job. And this is his own student. And like I talked about earlier, you got to remember that the way that graduate programs work is basically like this guy's your mentor, right? It's like a karate or jujitsu or whatever, right? Where the quality of your black belt in jujitsu is kind of determined by who your teacher was, right? Like if you have a teacher or I guess a sensei, whatever the fuck it's called, who's just giving out fucking belts to everyone, then people kind of view your belt as a little bit shittier. Whereas if you have like a teacher that a lot of people respect, then they view your belt as like being more respectable, right? It's based off the perception of your teacher, right? And so this guy William Mason, he has all the incentive in the world to be like Harry Harlow is a genius. He was my mentor when I was getting my postgraduate degree and all that stuff. He has like every incentive in the world to say these things, but he doesn't. He says the opposite. He says this guy was a fucking psycho and he did nothing for anybody. Right? That's that's what he's saying. Um, and so I was trying to find the exact quote that he said. Whatever, wasn't there. Uh, oh yeah. So This is the quote from Mason. So he said that Harlow kept this going to the point where it was clear to many people that the work was really violating ordinary sensibilities, and that anybody with respect for life would find this offensive. It's as if he sat down and said, I'm only going to be around for another 10 years. What I'd like to do then is leave a great big mess behind. If that was his aim, he did a perfect job. And then another student said that Harlow used intentionally shocking terms to get a rise out of people, right? Pit of despair, rape rack, things like that. Did that on purpose because he was a fucking psycho. And then he died in 1981 of natural causes. It's the end of the story. We were all hoping for the same thing, that, a Planet of the Apes type situation would happen and these monkeys would bust up out of the fucking nursery and they'd, rip his nose and his balls off or whatever, like Travis the chimp. But it didn't happen. He died of goddamn cancer and he was like 76 years old. I mean, there's no there's no cherry on top. It's not like, oh, well, these experiments led to this great discovery. No, there's no that. Really, his greatest discoveries came with like meta learning and stuff like that. Everything else is not. everything everything else, I'd say, is has no scientific basis to it whatsoever, even if it is being taught. And that's just my personal opinion on the matter. And I do have 12 PhDs, so obviously my opinion matters a great amount. But regardless of the scientific outcomes of this was incredibly immoral. It's very clear that Harry Harlow was a psychopath who was mentored by other psychopaths, or at least one other psychopath in Lewis Terman. And so, yeah, that's it. That's the thing. Very depressing, not just in terms of this guy torturing monkeys, but also that he never faced any sort of retribution for uh the horrific acts that he committed. Um, yeah, it's the end of this one. I hope you guys have a good day, good week, a good year, a good life, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.